Hey, welcome to the Doc Analyzes Anything, the show where we analyze behavior, human behavior, any behavior. Any behavior. I messed it up a little bit, didn't I?
I don't know.
Yeah, let me start it over. Hey, welcome to the Doc Analyzes Anything, the show where psychology and science meet, and we analyze behavior, any behavior, human behavior, any behavior, including all behavior. Including, here's our behaviormatic, creating a wedding dance playlist of only sea shanties. Now this I like. I could get behind this.
I feel like sea shanties get you in the dancing move in a very sea shanties mixed with like an Irish pub type music. I just want to clap and like stop my foot while like turning in circles constantly.
Yeah, so I'm picturing like have you ever heard like jazz remakes of like modern dance music and pop music? That's always fun to me. I like that.
You mean I've heard a lot of like the wedding remix where they do like the musical of like a popular song, but it sounds nice. Yeah. Immediately pictured the SpongeBob song. That was the first thing I thought of when you said sea
shanty. That would be a choice.
Like the SpongeBob theme song, you mean?
Yeah, that's
the SpongeBob theme. Yeah,
it's got call and response.
I guess that could be a shanty of sorts. Yeah,
but what BPM is it though?
Oh God, do not. I can't even think of a good sea shanty off the top of my head.
I know one.
Give us what do you have?
I don't know any.
It is I know I have it on my Spotify. It's Weller something, I think.
Oh, you're still using Spotify?
Yeah. Weller Man, sea shanty.
What is that? Sing it.
Once was a ship I put to sea, the name of the ship was a balloon.
You can't play it for more than 8 seconds or we owe rights.
What?
You can't play it for more than 8 seconds or we owe licensing fee.
Yeah,
okay,
plus,
that is probably about 5 seconds.
We can't do it unless they pay us, is what I'm saying. So
yeah.
I do think though the Irish music would be a lot more, just because my parents played it and then played it for my children, and nothing get you all the looks of like great parenting from other people as having a 3-year-old on your shoulders going through the fancy person farmer's market singing "What Do You Do with a Drunken Sailor" early in the morning. Like on my shoulders, just belting it out.
See, I like that. So you guys know how I grew up. I grew up in a very like conservative house where like alcohol was never even discussed. It wasn't seen or talked about except in a negative light. And then like I appreciate being able to expose my kids to like that part of the world without it being like so taboo that like once they get a sip of it when they're 18, they're like, oh man, and then they go crazy. Because I went crazy once I figured out I wouldn't be struck by lightning the second it touched my mouth.
I mean,
I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I went crazy, and it wasn't like that, but it also just wasn't anything that was like my family did. You know what I mean? Like, except for my uncle, like, nobody was going out except for maybe once a year, and that was just like 1 or 2 drinks, and that was it. And so I like the idea of like the way we treat beers, like it's something to enjoy but not overdo. Like we're doing tastings.
I feel like how between you and I, and even Taylor discussing it with the boys, even though Jameson references it as us getting lit, but where it has a very healthy context to drinking as a whole. And even like I feel like the brewery babies nowadays are going to grow up because like instead of just going to normal restaurants with their families, going to breweries. And I mean, it's like the fun like thing of you go there, get a flight or get a pint, whatever you do, and play like board games with everyone and just hang out and have it have a very like healthy environment to it, perhaps you could phrase it as. And so yeah, I think people growing up, it's going to kind of get away. I mean, people are still going to go and get messed up, but it's going to be a lot better. I feel like
We'll see. We'll see.
we'll see.
Although no one's drinking anymore.
Yeah.
I was about to say it. It sounds like the way everything's going, it's gonna like do the pendulum back the other way, where nobody's drinking. So then the next generation's gonna go wild again, and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. But
Why do you think it is that nobody's drinking nowadays?
I think, for one, if you had nothing else to do during COVID, that you kind of just like that's what you did, and either you decide you had enough of it, or you're like, nope, this is becoming an issue, and so now I don't want to do it because I don't want it to stay an issue. And with the way things are getting more expensive, unless you're drinking the cheap stuff just to get messed up, it's not as easy to just go out and enjoy a nice beer or a mixed drink or something, compared to like,
That's true.
and when we were younger, we were drinking the cheapest stuff possible just for the effects of it. And I think that may be what people are still doing if they're doing it, but there's just fewer people doing it, you know?
Yeah. True. Well,
True,
maybe
true.
with it having a healthy idea to it, it'll make a swing back once like our kids are adults. So then it's viewed as more of a laid back thing rather than going and getting messed up. And so they'll sip on it and not.
The theory is always the pendulum keeps swinging back and forth, and it's supposed to eventually settle somewhere in the middle. But with what we've seen in society the last couple of decades, it seems like it's just like gaining momentum and swinging more wildly one way or the other, rather than settling down in the middle like you expect it to. So we'll have to see.
I know how we'll get it to come back. Enter prohibition again.
Yeah. I mean, there's a subset of people, I'm sure, that are pushing for that now, because they're bringing back all the fancy things that everybody loved in political history, like racism and all those things. So bring it all on back, I guess, is the mantra.
Going back in
But
time.
you know, we that's not what we're here to talk about today. Surprisingly,
It's not.
shockingly, no. Today we're going to talk about schizophrenia, what it is, how we treat it, and how we view it as behavioral scientists rather than traditional psychologists. But before we get into that, I am your host, Dr. Steven Sparks, along with me, as always, Kyle Suri, and our most of the time, co-host, Dr. Master Chief Meow Meow here, who has basically decided not to hang out with us since we were in Florida. So thanks for being
I've been
back.
busy.
I know you've been picking up
duties
shifts.
to-
I see you've been picking up shifts at the animal hospital, getting some extra cash.
Sorry, I'm broke.
Going to beer week.
Are you saving lots of lives though?
I'd like to think so.
Brad, I got a fish that's not doing so hot. It was almost belly up today, and then we revived it by putting it in cleaner water.
Oh, I thought you were gonna say by putting it in the toilet.
Yes, that's.
That wouldn't do
I was
it.
gonna say
Well,
that
Dr. Sparks, please make the joke that you were, or tell the story of what you did the other night.
Oh,
What'd you do?
I bought a rack of ribs, but it was like one of the 3-packs, and I brought it. I made too much. Didn't want to have all these leftovers, so I took it to him at the animal hospital for him to share with his cronies over there. Who knows what they're plotting? But and walk in, and he's talking to a patient who was out in the waiting room, so I didn't want to interrupt. And I'm like, this person could be going through something horrible with their animals, so I couldn't say it out loud like I really wanted to. But as he took the rack of ribs, I'm like, all right, now I need you to go in the back and tell your coworkers that I came in and said, there's something wrong with my pet pig. Will you check it out for me?
Is he gonna be okay?
I can tell you, he's gonna make everyone feel better.
So that is what you get when I walk
like
into
it.
the animal hospital.
I like it.
Now I
All
dare you
right.
to walk into a human hospital and do the same thing.
My grandpa.
My grandpa's not doing too well.
I feel like you could go into like a house of worship also and be like, will you make me a wife or something? You know what I mean? Like something like that. But all right. On to the topic. We've wasted 10 minutes of our time. Probably not really 10 minutes, but the counter started 10 minutes ago.
My day's been better prolonging this.
Yeah,
Well,
it's
good.
all downhill from here. So this is going to have some overlap probably with the memory episode. I think that was the last one we recorded, but it's hard to remember. It all blends together at one point or another. And didn't want to do this at first because I didn't want to have too much overlap. But then I thought if it's kind of fresh in the memory about how we talked about memories are created, the way that they can be altered based on remembering things slightly different or talking about them slightly different or having someone tell us, nope, that's not correct. The gaslighting, brainwashing, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
Maybe it would be a good one to have back to back or closely together so you can see the overlaps of how some of these things might come to be. So we'll start off with giving the DSM-5 definition description of what schizophrenia is, and then talk about it kind of based on our science and then some of the things we've seen in that sort of thing. So I think we'll go through this. It's important to remember this is like for someone being diagnosed, not just what would you see necessarily, what would you expect to see to like, oh, I wonder if my family member has this. So especially some of these others where it doesn't necessarily match with what the global picture of it is. Don't go around thinking, oh, everybody around me has schizophrenia or something like that. But the number one thing we always go back to, and it's actually listed as in one of the sections here, is if you see somebody who is struggling and they fit some of these, maybe find a way to help guide them to getting some help, that sort of thing. Because I may say it again, and I know I've said it in other episodes, but if you think about hallucinations and delusions, if the voices were all telling you, great job, good work out there, keep it up, that wouldn't be problematic. It would actually be helpful. It'd be reinforcing some of the behavior that we are engaging in. And there's no reason to seek help if they are actually helping you. And so
No,
it's only if
I wish, sorry to interject, I wish daily I just had random voices in my head telling me how good of a job I was doing. I'd be like, oh,
I mean,
thank you.
I do, but
That's
it's
totally
my
how
own.
this is.
So
Huh?
so I do. I'm always just constantly in my own ear, like, you're doing great out there, man. You're
Keep it
it's
up. You're making a difference.
millions of people listen to this and they all love you. No,
You're making a difference.
Thank you.
all
Doing
right.
my
So
own.
there's a few different sections in how what you have to meet to have a diagnosis of schizophrenia. You have to have section A is what we more think of the actual positive and negative symptoms. So to the diagnostic crew, they say positive is something added, kind of like positive reinforcement is an item that is added that increases the future frequency of behavior. These are things that wouldn't be seen in the normal public, but are seen in someone with schizophrenia. So delusions, hallucinations, disorganized speech, um, grossly disorganized or catatonic behavior, and then the negative symptoms such as diminished emotional expression or avolition, which is a severe persistent lack of motivation or ability to initiate and maintain goal-directed activities such as hygiene, work, social interactions, that sort of thing. So positive is things that you wouldn't see in the normal public. Negative are things that seem to be missing from what your typical peers may do, such as being able to be goal directed.
Did you further define that? Because I've got like
No,
a lot of. Because is it like I know people who are like, I'm gonna be a millionaire someday, and I could classify that as a delusion, like just based on like reality. Like you're not gonna be a millionaire someday. Is it that, or is it like the more? Is there some sort of line that you have to cross in order for that to be considered like, oh, you're truly delusional?
truthfully, I don't think there is a real line. I think it always comes down to, we've talked about before, what society thinks is acceptable or normal. And so there's a lot of things that we see out there, people doing, even politics, social media, these sort of things that they're out there talking, and you're like, that is out there. I can't believe anybody believes that. That seems delusional. But if enough of society is like, nope, that's okay, then maybe it's not really delusional speech. Whereas historically, 20 years ago, we would have just been like, anything that you believe that just doesn't make sense. It's out of the ordinary. I mean, even a lot of the conspiracy theories would be considered delusional before it became popularized to follow these conspiracy theories and that sort of thing. And so it's really hard to find that dividing line now. But
Right.
hallucinations is like you're actually hearing voices or seeing things versus grandiose thoughts about like I'm I'm going to be president one day. I'm going to have billions of dollars. I'm better than all of you. You're all my minions. That sort of thing.
Well,
Um,
and I think about that, like, compared to people who are like, I am Jesus or I am the Beatles or whatever, like you've talked about before.
and that can be a delusion if they're not actually having sensory input that's telling them these things. You know what I mean? And so it depends. Like, is there a voice telling you you're Jesus, or are you just delusional and believe you're Jesus? Which is one that we see a lot. I'm very surprised how many times the Beatles have come up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
especially
Is that a common one? Like
it's been
everyone sees themselves as the Beatles.
several people. Sometimes they are the Beatles. One person told me that they at one point they were each one of the Beatles, and not like different days. They were telling me there's like, yeah, at one point I was Paul, and then I was Ringo, like in the same sentence. I'm like, all right then, cool.
What do you think it is about
Um,
the Beatles? Why can't they be like Kiss?
I believe it has to do with the age range of people and what was popular at what time, that sort of thing. But I've also had people that were maybe children or even not born yet during the heyday of the Beatles, who then told me that they trained the Beatles, that they were the ones who taught them to play music and that sort of thing. And so I don't know, maybe it's just because they've always been in the limelight, so to speak. Even now, we still talk about them, even though there's only what, a couple members left, sort of thing. But um, I think anything that is that well known and popular could be, what someone jumps to and starts thinking about. Um, Whereas hallucinations, it can be almost anything. And I always have given the example, if you may have experienced this too, like walking home late at night, studying at the library. It's like 3 a.m. on campus, haven't eaten, tired, delirious. And I like kept thinking of hearing footsteps behind me, but turn around, there's nothing there. You know what I mean? And like, as your brain is playing tricks on you, it'd be pretty easy to start seeing shadows and things and start really believing something's back there rather than my ability to recognize, nope, I'm just really tired. None of this is real. Just get home and get something to eat real quick.
Well, one time I was in, and I probably completely off, but just talking about seeing shadows and like convincing yourselves of things. There's one time I was at a bar in Savannah, Georgia, and there's like haunted tours and everything. And I was at this one bar and I saw the crew come in. And so then listening to them as a non-paying customer, but I listened. I wanted to hear what that lady had to say. So
So you're
then,
ripping her off.
yeah, but dude, they're giving haunted tours. Come on, who's actually the one ripping people off? Um, so listening to it, and she's talking about the people that are like figures within this bar and everything, and the things that people see. And then I go into the bathroom. I remember I'm standing at a urinal. No one else is in there, but I convince myself that I see a shadow. Like I hear something in the stall next to the urinal, and I look down and I see like a shadow of a figure on the ground. And I'm like, I know it's nothing, but what if that's that thing?
Yeah, I'll say like when my grandfather died, I remember walking into the room and he like his chair's in the corner and seeing him there even though he wasn't there. And so sometimes it is just response strength. What is it? The salience of him always being in that spot. He had emphysema and didn't get up and move around very often. He was just there every time I walked in the room for my entire life until I was 12, 13. So just expecting him to be there, you're seeing him there even though he's not, sort of thing. You may have been expecting to see something, especially after a couple of drinks. And so, your brain's playing tricks on you. And we'll get into a little bit because we're still even like not through the criteria here, but there is some research. I remember being told in school that people with schizophrenia were more likely to have lower IQs, and not like subnormal necessarily, but on the borderline, lower level. And it might be that you don't have as much understanding or knowledge to combat those things you are experiencing, that it's just kind of like the firing of neurons and expecting to see something that, if you weren't a skeptic, maybe you would have like dived deep, I don't know, into that and really wanted now to tell everybody, nope, I saw ghosts. Kind of like that one time you dated that girl that was possessed by demons. So not while he was
I've
dating her.
heard this story.
No, you.
I was
I
gonna
was trying
say,
to
don't look at
divert it.
me.
Come on.
Uh
I'm going to bring out the
not
skeletons in the closet.
not while you were dating her though, just
We never
previously
formally
or
dated, so that
okay. Anyways,
Let's talk about that.
yeah, really. No, I want to like really hit the point home too that there are a lot of people with schizophrenia who do not sit on that lower end of the IQ spectrum as well. There's a lot of geniuses like the John Nash from A Beautiful Mind movie, although that was a misportrayal of his life. I wish it was real because we could really dive into that one if it was. But
Yeah.
and potentially like Nikola Tesla was thought of likely being schizophrenic as well because he had hallucinations, delusions, that sort of thing. So there are people that are
like you're
extremely
saying Nicolas Cage. Sorry. Continue.
anyways, there are people that are extremely intelligent that have this as well. But the idea was generally people tend to be on the lower end of the IQ spectrum when they have this diagnosis. And so I don't want anybody out there that has a schizophrenia diagnosis thinking we're saying that you must be unintelligent. Just it tends to be down at that lower end of things.
Well, you're saying
So
you're not low intelligence, but
well, if we want to get into it, it's another episode, but I don't even buy into the whole IQ numbering system or any of this. It's just like an arbitrary number based on how you answer a set of questions. It doesn't
just
show
because you
true
scored low on
intelligence.
it doesn't mean you can just push back against it.
I've actually never had one. And
I'd be
so
curious. I've always been curious.
The history of the IQ test is one of my favorite things to read into and talk about. It's fascinating.
Maybe you should lead one of our next discussions here in our next episodes and we can talk about it. One of the things that really they hit home on is like, oh, you can't study for an IQ test. You're just that smart or not. I'm like, I bet if we took one and then studied and then did it again, that we could do better on it. I bet we could figure that out. So
the only thing I'll say is the creator in France, Binet, is that his name? Was like, hey, I've got a thing here that will give you a number, but like, don't use it to like measure like a number of like intelligence. Like, don't put a numerical value to people's intelligence with it. Like, this is just a thing. And they're like, America was like, cool, we're gonna do what you said not to.
We're gonna put a number to it.
Yeah, it's exactly what we did.
yeah. So, real quick, reiterating: delusions, hallucinations, disorganized speech, grossly disorganized or catatonic behavior, or the negative symptoms of diminished emotional expression or avolition. So you need at least two or more of those, except if one of the delusions or hallucinations are so bizarre or consistent, like voice keeping a running commentary of behavior or thoughts, or two or more voices conversing with one another. At that point, you only need one of those to count. But there's other sections too. So you also need, for a significant portion of time since the onset of the disturbance, for the level of functioning in one or more major areas such as work, interpersonal relations, self-care to be below its normal level, or prior to onset at least. There's a duration, it needs to be continuous signs of disturbance for at least 6 months, unless you're treated and it works. And then schizoaffective disorder and depressive or bipolar disorder with psychotic features have to be ruled out. And what they mean by that is, for the depressive or bipolar, it's no major depressive or manic episodes have occurred concurrently with the delusions or hallucinations, or mood episodes, as they call them, for schizoaffective have not occurred during the active phase of symptoms. We'll get back to that in just a second, but as behavior analysts, we're worried more about looking at delusions, the hallucinations and those negative behaviors, and how can we address them, not whether or not you fit into one of these other categories instead of schizophrenia. Like we're looking at the behavior itself and treating them all the same at this point. So that's a little bit less interesting to us, but to actually fit this criteria of a true schizophrenia diagnosis rather than schizoaffective or the depressive or bipolar disorder with psychotic features, it has to not have any of those other features. The disturbance cannot be attributable to any physiological effects or substance abuse. So no drugs abuse, medication, another medical condition like maybe a stroke or a head injury, that sort of thing. Even though the behavior may be exactly the same, you may present identically, it would not be considered schizophrenia if it was caused by one of those things. If there's a history of autism spectrum disorder or communication disorder of childhood onset, additional diagnosis of schizophrenia is made only if prominent delusions or hallucinations, in addition to other required symptoms of schizophrenia, are also present for at least 1 month. Yeah, there used to be other subsites they've gotten rid of, such as the paranoid schizophrenia subset, disorganized subset,
Disorganized, that's right.
catatonic, residual, undifferentiated, that sort of thing. So those, they're just kind of putting them all under the same, even though I still often will see things like the paranoid schizophrenia in the paperwork with something we're working with somebody. I think oftentimes that's just because somebody is they were trained years ago and now we're on a new diagnostic criteria. I've actually heard of psychologists going into saying, I knew as soon as I walked in the door what number I was going to give somebody. And I'm like, that's not right, you know? So if it was truly done well and really meant something, like again, we just said we don't necessarily agree with IQ testing to be a good indicator of much anyways. But if it was that, it's one thing, but then society had to go around and use it to hurt people. And so I'm supportive of getting rid of that sort of thing if it is, except now whatever we replace it with is going to probably be used the same way. And we're just going to keep cycling through this until people stop being
Someday.
jerks, you know? So let's just not be jerks, maybe.
That's the common denominator there.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, schizoaffective, depressive or bipolar disorder with psychotic features, and schizophrenia. When we're seeing somebody, just because someone else also depressed doesn't mean we're gonna like treat them different. We're just gonna also treat their depression. You know what I mean? We're seeing the same behavior, except you're also feeling like down and sometimes not even wanting to or willing to leave the bed. So let's help you with that as well. So we're going to talk about all these things kind of in the same bubble in terms of those positive and negative behaviors rather than truly about this individual diagnosis. But I think whenever society hears about these things, they just automatically assume it's all schizophrenia. So we'll put it all there together in the same episode.
That's what we do for our listeners.
Yeah. It's also, we have to remember that we're seeing the most extreme where it's also leading to dangerous behavior. You know what I mean?
Right.
We've had people that were living in society doing just fine with delusions and hallucinations. You know, maybe they needed help. Maybe they had a caregiver, a family member that looked out for them, but they were living on their own. And then something happened, and everybody's like, you know what? That's too dangerous. Like someone believing they're Jesus and assaulting people on the street, calling them infidels because they believe that they're, you know, I don't know. Sometimes it's demons. Sometimes they don't believe in them, that sort of thing. That's the dividing line, you know? You believe you're Jesus, cool. Now you're either confronting people or assaulting them because you believe you're Jesus, no longer cool.
It was cool until it wasn't.
Right. So I know that they said that can't be caused by drugs or head injuries, but we have definitely seen people who have exhibited these behaviors at that same time that's necessary. Like that's one thing they didn't list in there, but it used to be a clear criteria was it had to be onset at the end of adolescence or early adulthood, like that late teens, early 20s onset to be schizophrenia. I think they've gone away from that a lot, but it used to be all the, you know, mental illness diagnoses had to be during those years where you were really becoming who you are, that had to have been when it occurred. Otherwise, I think the idea was it couldn't be some medical or biological cause within you because it would have happened already.
Oh,
um,
that makes sense.
like
So
if you,
why is it then, and not maybe it's different now, but why is it that it can't be once your brain is fully formed and you are who you are, so say in your 30s or so?
I think it's the same reason you can't say, according to this, anyways, even though we do see it, that it was caused by drugs or a head injury or something else, because it's this medical model where there is a disease in your head, and that is what is causing this to occur. And so if something else causes it to occur, then it can't be the same thing, even though you present identically to somebody else, regardless. um and so they don't know what causes schizophrenia, at least except for some of these cases I'll discuss quickly. uh they've always thought it was, again, and we talked about this in some of the other episodes as well, a serotonin issue, because they were giving a lot of people who had or have schizophrenia or had schizophrenia diagnoses, schizoaffective. I guess generally just a lot of people who have mental psychiatric diagnoses also have seizures. And so they were giving medications for seizures to people who had a diagnosis of schizophrenia, and they were seeing that those positive behaviors, the ones that weren't normally seen in the rest of society, like hallucinations and that sort of thing, they stopped. They still had the negative, the things that like basically is missing from your repertoire, like those social interactions and that sort of thing, didn't magically appear. But the things that were like, no, this is weird and it's very unique to schizophrenia or the related conditions, those went away. So because the seizure medication was affecting the serotonin levels, it must be caused by serotonin. And that's why years of psychiatric medication research has all gone after like these serotonin reuptake inhibitors, SSRIs, and those sort of things, because they've gone down this line of, hey, it affects those behaviors, so it must be caused by that. But there's a lot of research to show that serotonin has little or nothing to do with the causes. And so we'll get into it here in a moment, but it is likely that changing or altering the neurotransmitters may prevent some of the activity to occur that would allow this, but it's still not the base cause. It's not the medical model that this is what's going on. And so there isn't a good answer for what's causing it. You can go back to our genetics conversation early on. There's only correlational data. There's no actual causation. You can't say it's genetic at all. Just if one person in the family is more likely to have schizophrenia, another's has a higher percentage, but it's still not necessarily likely that they will have it. Um, and so that
So
is
that's saying high serotonin levels are just correlative with diagnosis.
no, they haven't even found that. They have only found that medications that affect serotonin levels affect the behavior.
Is
Oh,
there
okay.
any other receptors that have been identified within studies that have a certain, this is not the proper word to use, but affinity been associated with schizophrenic patients?
I know that they've done testing in different areas. I don't know what's happened with those, but I know that the medications that they use still are all concentrated around serotonin. And so I don't know that they found a lot of basis to say if something else may be causing it at all. But we'll get into this right now then about, and this is where partially anyways, why we want to talk about the memory episode so closely is we've talked about how, yes, there's brain activity going on. Neurotransmitters are transmitting. There's neural connections being made from one neuron to a next, and there is this activity whenever we're learning anything. So obviously there is neuroactivity and neuro transmitter activity occurring whenever we do anything. So it may be that this just interrupts that process, but learning still has to go on at a behavioral level as well. So you have one part of the brain that is where some sort of learning occurred when you're doing a CAT scan or CT scan. You can see the different areas of the brain. A new learning occurs, and then there's a overlap or connection between the lighting up of different areas. In all likelihood, that is that neurological connection being made between two neurons that wasn't there before, or they're just correlated enough together with this new thing being learned that they're all being activated. It may just be that serotonin is involved in that process, but is not actually the cause. It is just something that is necessary for the normal processing of this information. You know what I mean? It is
Mhm.
possible that it's blocking it from occurring, but not actually treating the cause. And we also know that we have a lot of people that are on all these medications that by the time they come to us, they've tried every medication and almost the limit of every medication, and it's still occurring. So it's also not across the board effective. It just has
Right.
helped some people.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting that it's useful for some people, not for other people, and then it makes me wonder what role the environment plays, what role like past trauma or stress plays. I don't know
Yet
much about schizophrenia, to be honest.
I think maybe a good way to look at it first is, again, one of the ways that we've talked about drugs being playing a role. I have seen several people come through who were reported to have had no issues whatsoever, taken psychedelic drugs, and then all of a sudden had this severe onset. Um, and looking at it again, they're using psychedelic medications now to treat things like anxiety and depression. And so we know that is altering the brain chemistry, rewiring it, if you will. It's just these neural connections being made to different parts of the brain. And so, um, even though there's things going on in the brain as well, it's the actual learning and the verbal behavior involved that's part of it too. So, uh, thinking, a lot of people will report they take mushrooms or acid or something, and they'll figure out the meaning of life, or they figure out how to create world peace, and then they forget, soon after what they thought of, what they've come up with, but they had that idea while they were high. Imagine the euphoric, calming sense of having done that overwhelming like peacefulness of, oh, I figured it all out. And that is kind of the feeling that when you work with somebody on anxiety or depression while on these things, they're helping you go through this process and strengthen these responses and this behavior of everything's okay. There's nothing, it's not in my control. We're all good here. And this peacefulness that you're actually creating some of these neural connections in the brain. Um,
Hmm.
Very likely on the flip side of that, a bad trip can have the alternate effect where like, oh, you're thinking about something that is a hallucination that's not real. You're perseverating, you're fixated on it, you're thinking about these negative things, that becomes strengthened in your repertoire. It's paired with some of these other situations. And now instead of finding or learning some coping mechanism or some calming techniques throughout the process, you've actually created a paranoia or some sort of trauma history that wasn't there necessarily. And if
Okay.
you kind of go down that rabbit hole and keep thinking about these things over and over and over again, eventually it's like we talked about with the memory episode where you keep telling the same story and it alters a little bit, and then 10 years down the road, it's no longer the same story to you. If you keep going down and feeding into this and thinking these negative things that aren't based in reality more and more and more, then it is possible that is kind of can cause some of this disordered thought processes, the disordered thinking. And who knows that if it's very salient, it could even be just one time, one intense situation, some learning occurred, neurological connections are being made, and now it's, again, I don't like the rewiring or miswiring, uh, metaphor, but it could be that sort of thing where you've created some situation in these neural connections that things just aren't going to work correctly anymore. And so,
Right.
I know one day you're fine, the next day you're like, wow, that person's not right. And sometimes it does lead to that catatonic subset, even though they don't use it anymore, where there's almost no interaction whatsoever. They're just kind of lost in their own thoughts, ongoing until every once in a while they'll say something that's not based in reality, and that's kind of it. That seems, I've only encountered that a few times, but they did seem to be at least reported to be related to psychedelic drug usage.
That's also interesting to think of. Just in that LSD can mimic what, or like LSD, for example, would mimic what maybe like a mental health episode would also be. I don't know.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Like,
Well, and it is almost the same for. So if you ever talk to somebody who's going through an episode, but it's episodic, they are back to being able to communicate with you normally afterwards. It's very much like that. Like you're talking gibberish. You're not making any sense. I make perfect sense to myself, but it sounds
Yeah.
like you're messing with me, sort of thing. And then there's a level of distrust. That's where some of the paranoia comes from. It really is very similar, except that usually if you know you're on the medication, you know it's causing, or not medication, the drugs, you know it's causing it. A lot of people can help themselves through and have a fun time or even therapeutic time rather than the bad thoughts. But if the bad thoughts take over, then you're kind of screwed at that point. And not necessarily forever. Most of the time you just have a bad trip and you're like, never doing that again. But in some cases, it seems like it can really mess people up for the long haul. So, and you never know, maybe there's a predisposition there. Maybe it is
yeah,
you didn't have this idea of what is real enough in the first place, and that's affecting it as well. But we have seen it, and they have these diagnoses, and then you're like, well, but according to this DSM, it can't be drug caused. So what's going on here? You know what I mean?
we should make Brad drop acid sometime for science, just to watch what happens.
That would be a big no from me. No, thank you.
Yeah.
We can have one of you guys do it. I think you guys
for science.
Or do I have to be the person because I'm not a behaviorist?
No, I would say more than anything, like you don't reuse the lab rats when they've already experienced the conditions, and so I'm out. But regardless, yeah, well, I think it's either you or Kyle, but Kyle's so adverse to any drugs that I think he'd immediately have a bad time regardless.
Dude, so am I. Are you kidding me?
That's true too.
I dabbled and I hated it.
Fair.
So, back to the topic at hand. Let's not get into any crazy stories here. I think another thing that kind of supports this theory or this idea of the neural connections, the faulty connections, or whether they're really faulty or if it's just something that has been created being a little off, is that we see the same brain patterns or thought patterns with people who have close head injury. And so now you're talking about parts of the brain, the neurons, the neurological connections potentially being physically damaged.
Mm-hmm.
They're not there anymore. We've lost part of our repertoire. We have to relearn it, or just a personality change altogether. And there seems to be a lot of overlap between that sort of thing and, potential psychedelic drug use and making these connections that probably shouldn't have been made in the first place. I will go back and say, though, with a therapist, the data are showing a lot of promising results using these. And I think it's because there's a person there helping you build a positive repertoire through this. And so I'm not going to say not to do that, but I will say if you're doing these things just for fun, just be very careful that you are able to control your trip. Otherwise it could go badly. And even if you think you are, sometimes it can go badly. So, we also see this sort of phenomenon with isolation. Someone's alone, and again, really ties in closely with the memory piece. But at first you're just like, oh, I imagine COVID, but it could be any time. Your family's busy or your friends are busy. You haven't talked to anybody in a while. And you start thinking like, oh, I can't believe they're not calling me, those jerks. And then after a few weeks or something, you're like, oh, they must all be mad at me. And you start getting a little delusional about these. We're like, oh, they're all against me. And then after a while, you're like, oh, these people are after me. And there's somebody out there. And it's again, very similar to that, the telling a story and then embellishing it a little bit or telling it slightly different one time and it becoming real to you, or with the brainwashing, someone else saying, no, this is what's really going on over and over again. If you slowly tell yourself these things, and it's completely normal to be like, hey, so and so hasn't talked to me in 6 months. I wonder if they're mad at me. And then it snowballs from there and becomes like a, oh, I don't think we're even friends anymore. And then like, nope, they hate me, just because you're not experiencing enough outside of your own head to know that nope, these thoughts are just kind of wild that pop up here and there every once in a
You're
while.
responding to private contingencies, not necessarily socially mediated. Yeah, that's interesting. I do that usually.
I think almost everybody does to an extent. You know what I mean? You're like, oh shoot, they haven't answered. They didn't answer my last text. They probably hate me. I have like a couple friends that literally never answer a text, and every
Man,
time you're like, oh, what did I do? And then like pick up like nothing's ever happened. You know, like yeah, all right, that's just who you are.
I don't think I have a conversation with people without apologizing on like a daily basis. Like, hey, sorry. Like, for what? Why are you sorry?
You do.
For calling?
You do apologize a lot. That is true.
I think that I'm more of I think I'm more of a bundle of nerves than what I care to admit sometimes, or even like think that I am. Like I think I'm pretty laid back, but I'm very, very sensitive to social contingencies. Like, oh, what did that mean? You know, I don't know. Or what does the lack of this thing mean?
I can relate to that one.
I think most people probably
They say to people, I'm pretty laid back, but then I realize just how like anxious I get about a lot of things, or anxious, and how much of it am I truly just overthinking?
I think that's normal for a lot of people, but then because of the societal norms, if you're anxious about things, people think, oh, now you have a thing called anxiety, and then it becomes a medical thing, and then it goes on from there. Where I think it's normal for us to just like worry about things sometimes. You know what I mean? And as long as you don't let it snowball, you don't just perseverate on it, then it wouldn't become an issue. But since we keep it to ourselves and don't check in, hey, everything cool over there, then it just goes on until we are paranoid sitting in our little shell, you know?
So you're saying we're gonna be okay, Steve?
Yeah.
I'm saying some of us will be okay. Kyle, I do not know about you, but no,
Is it a 50-50 between Kyle and I? Like one of us will make it, one of us won't.
neither of you will probably rake it, but most of the listeners will. No, what it really reminds me of, and this is again off topic, but like watching Home Alone, and they're sitting in
Go
the
on.
church, and the older neighbor guy that saves him at the end is sitting there like afraid to talk to his son. He's like, well, you won't know unless you do it, and then you don't have to be worried about it anymore. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
if we all just went out and checked in and saw what was going on and asked people and like just communicated, there'd probably be a hell of a lot less of the anxiety about these social things going on.
I mean, that's such like a 90s kid male raised by parents who were born in the 60s mentality too. Like, you're fine, shut up. Like, okay.
Well, but
yes, I'm fine.
there might be more to it. Obviously, we had the anxiety conversation, but
yeah.
in general, I think in society we worry about things because of these games we play that we think we're supposed to play, rather than just like, hey, I'm just gonna put it out there and see what you think. It would help a lot.
Yeah.
Now I've lost my spot. Look what you did, you little jerk.
Well played. Well played.
Full circle there. Was that the long game? That was the long game for
I just want you to picture our 4-year-old walking around saying that, and now the 2-year-old's starting to say it because they think it's so funny. So
my kid says "buzz your girlfriend wolf" a lot.
Yeah,
too.
we get that.
Your girlfriend's a wolf.
Yeah. So because I've lost my train of thought here, we'll go a little bit back to where something I was going to mention before and forgot. There's also a line of thought where people with schizophrenia may just not recognize their own internal dialogue. There's been some studies that suggest that if you play them their own voice, they won't recognize it, and they will say, oh, that's the voice I hear that's telling me to do things. And so it could be, we all think those intrusive thoughts where like, all right, you're teetering on top of a cliff, like jump. Oh no, I would never actually do that. Or like someone's running by and you're like, oh, trip. Nope, I'm not going to really trip them. But like that thought of what to do in that moment. Imagine you're having that, but it's in a voice that you don't recognize, even though it's your own internal dialogue. there's some theory that could play a role as well. A friend of mine was actually doing research on that until COVID hit, and I don't know if it's gone anywhere since, but he was testing
Really?
whether or not people recognize their own voices and then the amount of like distress it might cause and that sort of thing based on that. So
That is really interesting. So like you play a recording of yourself talking and out
yeah,
of an array or something you might not be
yeah.
able to distinguish your own.
And then also they'd start slowly altering it to see how close it had to be for you to recognize it, as well as, how it was affecting them hearing the different versions of their voice and that sort of thing.
Right, because I don't know if I could tell you even like when I'm thinking to myself, quote unquote, what voice that even is. Like I don't think
Yeah,
it's
I don't know
my
either.
When I hear myself in my head, it's I'd compare it to a Mickey Mouse almost. Um,
All right.
wait, but are you joking or serious? Because I
no,
don't
no,
know.
I'm joking.
Okay, well, that's not as cool. I'm just saying that I don't know if it's my voice. Like if I'm thinking of like the ABCs or something right now, I don't know if I'm like thinking it in Kyle's voice per se. But I
I well
also
also
I
like you
also know that it's clearly not somebody else. It's distinct.
yeah.
It's distinctively me thinking it.
I try to
What
hear a David Attenborough with my internal thoughts. It puts me at ease.
I mean, imagine Morgan Freeman was just in your head. That'd be wonderful.
Yeah.
That and the positive thoughts, like you'd be the most productive person all time at that point. But
Done.
no, I also think it's hard to like you sound normal to yourself as you're speaking, but then you hear yourself recorded and it doesn't sound right to you either. You know what I mean? So what could it really it might be, and it might tie back into this idea of not with everybody, but some people, and not to say lower IQ, but less learning history in terms of adaptive behavior and how to handle stressful situations and different stimuli where, all right, I don't know to be skeptical that this thing I'm thinking or hearing in my head is really just me and just my normal verbal behavior throwing me for a loop. And so
Hmm.
because you don't have a level of critical thinking that would walk you through that and walk you back, maybe that's why you're more likely to, key off on it and be like, oh, nope, I'm hearing voices. There's something going on here.
Mm.
I will say a lot of these though, that we've talked about so far are very much the one off here and there examples that we see compared to what we tend to see often is either a person that goes on those normal lines of, all right, 17, 18, all of a sudden, they start hearing voices or having paranoid thoughts. But prior to that, they were already, people would say early on that they could see something was coming. You know what I mean? That things weren't just 100% right. Um, and that's kind of a little bit more normal from what we see with people. And again, is it a chicken or the egg situation? Is it lack of learning history, or I'm doing the hand quotes, low IQ, or is it that this disordered thinking is causing you to not be able to do well in an IQ test? You can't really know for a fact, but you would assume that people who weren't able to do some of those critical thinking skills might be more susceptible to the suggestion of this sort of thing. And the same way we talked about memories being formed, how it doesn't just pop, poof, it's in there, but you repeat it to yourself or you relive it in your head, it becomes strengthened in your repertoire. What we often, and I say we see, we can only get glimpses of it based on someone's history and what we hear, but a lot of times you see someone who found reinforcement in saying and doing wild, silly, strange things because they lack some of the social skills in order to get either attention or escape from aversive conditions by normal means or typical pro-social means, and then that gets shaped over time. And so, you
Hmm.
have a early elementary school child who can't get his peers to pay attention to him, but, when they start saying like, "Oh, there's a monster in my closet," and everybody's laughing, or, saying the voices are telling me to do this and everybody's giggling, or, can't get attention from the caregivers adults, but then you say, "Nope, I didn't do it. The voices told me to do it," and everybody's acting shocked or upset or like, "No, they didn't," or "You're just faking it," and that sort of thing. you could see how that reaction would reinforce that type of behavior. And even though the person may not believe it as they're saying it as a young child, through that normal shaping and reinforcement process, it very well could be that by the time they're an adult or early adult, late childhood, late adolescence, it is becoming real to them the same way telling a story that is embellished becomes real to you over time.
Right.
And so we have to remember, what do we know from a behavioral science perspective? All cognition is, all thinking is, all our emotions are, all these things are, they're verbal behaviors. So the things we say to ourselves or picture in our own head, mixed with the neural connections in the neurotransmitter, the chemical reaction in the brain, and then the physiological glandular, response of how does it make our body feel? What does it do to my heart rate? Those sort of things. And so as it becomes more real to you, you're going to have more of a physiological response. It's going to become more part of you. And then over time, it is part of you, at least in theory, because we don't have emotions. We don't have, it's hard to have a cognitive disability or psychiatric diagnosis if you can't even have, you don't have the language to have these thoughts to yourself in the first place. Theoretically, they have to come from, some sort of, I'd say, inappropriate, inefficient, somehow this learning history has become disordered, not that it just occurred in your brain one day. It's kind of the theory that we come across from a behavior analytic, perspective. And so, we've already talked about, the meds. Usually by the time we see somebody when they're having severe behavior issues, they've tried every med. And even if they haven't, we know that the meds may address some of these issues, but they don't cure them necessarily, because we know that, at least so far, there's no studies that suggest the effects of the meds are curing anything that's causing it in the first place. We already talked about that.
Yeah.
So how do we treat it? We go in and look at it in terms of, all right, this behavior is occurring. We know, and I've said this in other episodes before, if you try to correct somebody and tell them, nope, this is what's real, they're going to think that you're messing with them, that you're not real, that you are out to get them or change their thoughts or tell them that, they're not right. Or in general, maybe you just sound like you're talking gibberish to them in the moment. You could potentially, if you were extremely skilled and had a lot of training, almost shape the delusions so you're not really feeding into them, but like you do with someone that's on a psychedelic, trip, helping them develop some skills like that. But that would take a lot of knowledge and training. And so normally we say don't try to feed into the delusions or hallucinations whatsoever, because you can do a lot more harm than good, making them kind of go deeper into those delusions if you reinforce them. Instead, what we do, ask everybody to do, is kind of, it's a very simple shaping. Not, I accept what you just said. I hear you. By the way, did you see what the weather's doing? Bring up a completely separate topic based in reality. And if they join your conversation based in reality, get excited, have a great time, have a good interaction, because now they're not getting the reinforcement for those statements not based in reality, but they are getting the ones for the ones based in reality. And so even if internally they're still having these disordered thoughts, it's not changing what's going on internally. Externally, they'll be able to take part more in society because they're able to match their verbal behavior to those around them and what people will interact with them based on. And we also know that when children are learning language, it starts off in overt, out loud. You hear kids talking to themselves all the time, practicing their language. And as it becomes strengthened in the repertoire, it becomes internalized and becomes what we call like our thoughts and our cognition. In theory, if we shape that external verbal behavior of, saying something about like the voices or I'm God or something along those lines, and we reinforce things based in reality, that should also strengthen them internally, and they should have less thoughts that are not based in reality. It should be more things that make sense to those around them as well. And it's kind of like we've talked about before. If you have all happy thoughts and you catch yourself having a negative thought, you like, nope, think of something like 3 things that make me happy or 3 positive things. You'll just start having more positive thoughts over time. If you have more say more things based in reality, you should have more reality-based thoughts over time as well. And we may actually be able to treat some of the internal symptoms, even though our main purpose is to allow someone to engage in others in society better.
I have no follow-up. Yeah.
Very well put.
Well
Yeah.
put.
How dare you not have any follow-up?
I kept thinking of things to say, and then you said them.
Yeah.
Well, the shocking part about it, really, I think, is it seems superficial to somebody just listening. Like, oh yeah, you're just not talking about
Yeah.
these things. And because we have this disease model that we all follow, everybody assumes that you can't just shape or change behavior the way we're talking about with reinforcement or extinction, like you would picking your nose or something like that. You know what I mean? It seems like it's different because it's in our head and because this medical model, but it really does work just the same way. And we have seen vast improvements for people, and at least what their conversation is like, based on just really throwing a party and getting excited whenever they talk to us about something that's real.
Well, the idea that you can prescribe environmental response to verbal behavior is lost on a lot of people. Like, hey, across the board, we can shape behavior, and not just for the sake of shaping behavior, but so that somebody can actually lead a more happy life. I mean, like, there's thoughts and things that people battle that they don't want to have to battle. But if people are trained enough to help shape them and their private verbal behavior and their public verbal behavior towards things that this will actually help this person, it can be pretty wildly groundbreaking, even though it's like very simple. It's like, oh yeah, I do that anyways. That's what I hear a lot. It's like, frame it this way, like, oh, we do that anyways.
Yeah.
Well, you don't, because I've been observing for weeks and haven't seen it one time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. It's not intuitive.
It's really hard because it seems simple and it doesn't seem simple. So the idea that this very complex process of stimuli and behavior, verbal behavior, like basically the words and concepts that are in your repertoire interwoven, it's seemingly endless. And so it creates this process of cognition that everybody assumes must be just immense and so complicated that most people don't understand. And I think that's why they go to either the medical model or the cognitive. It's in the brain. It's like magically something occurs in the brain and then the behavior occurs. Whereas really it is two sides of the coin. Like, yes, there's activity going on there, but then behaviorally we're able to see it, or it's occurring as well. Maybe it's maybe in your head too, but we know that teaching actually creates these neurological connections. And so you can't have one without the other. It's two sides of the same coin. We can either try to alter it in the brain, which we don't quite understand enough, even though they've been doing a lot of work with that, or, hey, behavior analytically, we can change it fairly easily, and then learn about how that affects what's going on neurologically is where I think we should be going in our field. But I don't know if anybody or many people are doing that right now. You know what I mean? Like, where's that interaction there? Where does it go? Which neurons and which areas of the brain are affected by, me in this situation versus this situation? You can almost map it on and see how it really works if you do the research for that. So. All right. So I guess we'll end this the way we always end it. Let's look to the positive out there. There's so much negative going on, but remember, every time you have a negative thought, think 3 positive things. It'll hopefully start changing some of that internal verbal behavior. Find the good people and the good things in life that make you smile, and just try to enjoy yourself, because you never know when you're going to be out there walking around your garden, talking to yourself, inventing alternating currents. And then one day you look back at life and realize that you loved a pigeon like a man loves a woman, and maybe things don't quite make as much sense as you thought you did. So that's a Nikola Tesla reference if you didn't know, which probably most of you don't. So
A callback.
yeah, we're not talking from personal experience here, just so you all know. So